Joe Rogan is pledging to offer more balanced views after being publicly criticized by Neil Young and Joni Mitchell for spreading COVID-19 misinformation. The Canadian musicians asked to have their music pulled from the streaming platform Spotify this weekend in protest. They're now encouraging other artists and fans to also cut ties with Spotify.
For its part, Spotify now says it will add advisory warnings to any podcast discussing COVID-19. So, is the platform doing enough to combat misinformation? And how much power do musicians really have? To discuss, we welcome to CP24 tonight Stacey Lee Kong, founder of Friday Things, freelance culture critic Nico Stratus, and Bloomberg reporter Lucas Shaw. Thanks to all of you. Stacey, let's start with that 10-minute long Instagram video. We posted a little bit of that just before we started this conversation. Were you surprised about that response?
Not really. Joe Rogan always says he's always just asking questions, which I think is actually quite a sneaky way of putting it, because when he tries to say that he's just trying to be having an interesting conversation and, surfacing these interesting viewpoints, he's not really addressing the fact that they're not true. What he's doing is platforming misinformation and lies, but he's always going to try and be sneaky about it and say that it's just about, having the good conversation. So this is very on par with what he said before.
Nico, Spotify's slogan is listening is everything. Some of the platforms of these high-profile partners like Meghan and Harry are speaking up about this. So what about that public pressure Spotify's facing right now? Is it listening?
I mean, I don't think so. It's interesting with the Joe Rogan experience and, that show being on their platform. They bought that show for $100 million. Now, we don't know the full details of their plan because they've never made it public. But, they do have to have some sort of journalistic oversight of this program that is essentially their flagship program. That is a product that they have bought for a large sum of money. And when what they say they're doing is listening, but really what they're doing is kind of reacting after the public pressure has gotten to be too much, and then reacting, in this very softball way where they're saying, we will put advisories before these episodes, which is, kind of the bare minimum that should have been happening all along. So, they say they're listening, and really I would say, again, that they're just really reacting and not really coming up with any sort of plan. They're just sort of rolling with the punches as they land instead of anticipating them coming.
Lucas, I wonder if you can talk about, from a business perspective, is what we're seeing happen with Spotify right now what already happened with other things like Facebook?
It's similar in that they have to confront a kind of constant barrage of new information being uploaded all the time. There are thousands of songs and thousands of podcasts being uploaded every day. On the podcasting front, a lot of those are going to offer information that kind of ranges from ill-informed speculation to outright lying about any sorts of subjects, and they're just figuring out how to process all of it. But the Rogan situation is different because, as some of the co-panelists have pointed out, they are programming Rogan. They are paying him to be there. And so what they choose to do with Rogan is sort of different from the broader issue of misinformation, though I will add, there is a chance in their deal with Rogan that Rogan secured creative freedom. I wouldn't assume that Spotify has the ability to tell him what to say, nor that they really want to tell him what to say.
And I wonder, Stacey, should we be focusing on Joe Rogan and his promises to do better or be better, or should the accountability rest with Spotify?
Oh, I think there's so much accountability to go around, though. There's definitely Spotify. As both of my co-panelists have pointed out, Spotify has made editorial decisions. They are no longer just hosting content that they do not have any oversight over. Even if Joe Rogan has secured creative control, they paid for this. So they are now responsible for it. But Rogan himself is so popular. He has so many hundreds of millions of listeners. And I think it would be a mistake not to engage with what he's saying directly, because so many people are. And he knows what he's doing, right? He has been inviting the most fringe people onto his podcast for years now, and he's been financially benefiting from that. So I think he also deserves some accountability here.
So, Nico, this idea of Spotify now adding a content advisory to any podcast that discusses COVID, is that enough?
No. To put it bluntly, when I saw the news this morning, it reminded me of when we put content advisory stickers on CDs. It's this sort of way of avoiding accountability, right? It's saying, well, we put this disclaimer ahead, so our hands are clean here and we're going to back away. And it's taking a really hands-off approach to having any sort of level of accountability to a thing you should have had accountability to all along. I'm curious to see what they'll do in the coming days if, the pressure that is currently on them continues to build and continues to mount, what that will look like.
I think it looks like stocks dropping. Lucas, what do you think? Did Spotify respond because people started pulling their money?
No, I don't. I've been very reluctant to draw a real connection between Spotify's stock price and the news of the past couple of weeks. Spotify's stock price had been falling for basically the last year because the enthusiasm about its investment in podcasting had started to wane as people realized that if there was going to be a big payoff, it wasn't going to be for many years into the future. I think a lot of the kind of going up and down of its price and the fluctuation has been related to kind of general market fluctuation and what's happening with some of the tech stocks. Spotify does have to be very sensitive, though, to musicians pulling their music. While Neil Young and Joni Mitchell represent a really tiny share of listening, the risk for them was this cascade effect where a number of other artists joined them, and all of a sudden kind of the two businesses that Spotify's in, talk and music, are fighting with one another. And they're in a pretty tricky spot with this one because, as was pointed out with the kind of the content labels on music, Spotify does not want to get in business of having to decide what is and isn't appropriate with every single piece of content. At the same time, they recognize they have to do more to combat misinformation on the platform, and I don't think they're really sure what to do about it, which is why they have been in this position of being so reactive instead of proactive.
And at the end of the day, it really is just about the fans and about the users of Spotify. I wonder, Stacey, do you think a lot of people are going to actually cancel Spotify subscriptions over this in protest?
I don't know. So I definitely saw a lot of people talking about it, and certainly on Twitter there was a lot of people saying, here's the screen grab of my cancellation. But I think what we're up against in this kind of question is inertia. And there's also not a lot of other options. So there's Apple Music and there's Tidal, but if you love a playlist, like Spotify's playlists are quite good, and Pandora is not available here. And so I am curious to see if this will actually be a long-term change or if it was just something reactive and it was a small group of people who they're not going to really snowball into a bigger group of people.
So, Nico, do you think that we're going to see much change when it comes to Joe Rogan on Spotify on this issue with misinformation and COVID-19 vaccines?
I mean, I don't think so at the moment, to be honest. This has always been Joe Rogan's MO. He operated like this when Spotify offered him a $100 million contract. This has always sort of been his game. And I don't really see that changing. He said in his video today that he was going to try to do better. But, that is a promise that has been said before. It is a really blanket statement where you're not really saying anything, but you're taking 10 minutes to get there. So I'm really curious to see if anything changes. But I don't hold the highest hope. And really, we're only scratching the surface of the issues that people have with the people that Rogan platforms. We haven't even gotten into, the conversations that he has with people like Jordan Peterson, where they discuss racial politics, or they discuss, transgender issues, and they discuss all these other things in quite disparaging terms, and those have also never changed and have never really hit sort of the same cultural heights that we're seeing right now. So, I don't really think we're going to see a lot of change. I think if anything does change, it'll be at the Spotify level, but we'll sort of have to wait and see what that looks like.
Okay, well, we appreciate you all making time for this conversation tonight. Stacey Lee Kong, Nico Stratus, and Lucas Shaw. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.